Hi there. Mayor Steve Jones. Just wanted to welcome everyone. Thank you all for coming to participate. Just give you a little bit of backstory. In some of my many roles that I play, I'm the recent former president of the ACCOC, Association of California Cities, Orange County. And ULI approached ACCOC a little while back with this wonderful offer to come in and become an affiliate member, and also to offer this service to the member agencies to provide a TAP, or a technical assistance panel, area of study. And I got excited, and so we jumped all over it. I went straight back to City Hall and said, Lisa, we got to go chase this, right? So we submitted a couple proposals, and we're feeling very blessed that we were selected. So our Valley View corridor and West Garden Grove, something we've been working on internally for quite some time. Nothing excites me more than getting this kind of a brain trust to come in and spend 2 solid days driving around looking at it. And I am thrilled to see whatever they have come up with. So with that, I will go ahead and hand it over. Thank you.
Thank you. So my name is Kendra Chandler. I'm the executive director for the ULI, Orange County and Inland Empire. And I just wanted to once again also thank you for being here, and we're super excited and also feel honored to be able to provide this opportunity to the city of Garden Grove. And I am also extremely thankful to my members. All of these people to my left are members of ULI, and they have volunteered their time the last 2 days plus to work on this project, this technical assistance panel. So you're going to learn a little bit more about ULI and about what we've been doing over the last couple days. And thank you so much for being here.
Hello there. Again, thank you for having us. My name is Yolanda Sepulveda, and I am the co-chair along with Mike Ruane for the technical assistance panel that was conducted for the Valley View Business Corridor. So we're going to begin by just giving you a brief overview of a little bit about ULI as well as our process, and then we're going to get into what some of our findings were. So with that being said, about the Urban Land Institute, we are different than a trade organization. Again, we are a best practices group. We're founded in 1936. We conduct nonprofit research, and there's nearly 40,000 worldwide public and private sector professionals. So who we are essentially is comprised of every single professional that you would need to conduct professional real estate. Everybody from designers, architects, developers, bankers, land acquisition, anything that you can imagine that might be a player in a land development issue, that's who's involved in ULI. We consider ourselves special and lucky. That's one of the reasons that we can conduct TAPs, is that it's not necessarily a perspective from one single person or one single professional. It's a really well-rounded approach to the recommendations that we make. TAPs. So we use this term a lot, and you'll hear it, so just to make sure that nobody gets lost in the acronyms. TAP is a technical assistance panel. And the advisory services panels began in 1947, so they've been around. And the idea is that local cities and agencies can come to us, and there's a group of professionals. So we all work and or live locally. We're familiar with this area. We also really appreciate a lot of how Garden Grove fits into the overall identity of who Orange County is. We conduct these throughout the year all over the world, and then within California, and of course within Orange County. We do pro bono taps. This one was a pro bono tap that's done. Our Young Leaders Group also conducts these taps for other entities and nonprofit organizations. And the idea is that we provide tools. So we have a chance to really vet and provide the best possible recommendation for a solution by having an unbiased recommendation that all the professionals come together. In this case, what generally happens is we're provided a mission. We like a focus so that as we're working through all of our recommendations, we know that we're working towards the same idea at the end of the day. In this case, we worked with the city to develop what this mission could be. The mission is to look at retail and development strategies for the viability and sustainability of the Valley View Business Corridor. One of the things that we do within the TAP process is to identify who's going to provide this comprehensive team. What are the professionals that we're going to need at the table in order to provide this recommendation? So I'll quickly go through everybody, who they are, and the companies that they work with. They're sitting to my left. So Mike Ruane is the Executive Vice President for National Core. Myself, I'm a principal with Spectacle Design. Jeff Mayer is a principal with Mayer Creative. Hita Mosesman is a principal and vice president of RSG. Vicky Oshima, who's sitting in the audience, is a director of marketing and business strategies at Studio T-Square. Mary Borgia is the president of the Borgia Companies. John Gebhardt is principal with SEG Advisors. Richard Golis is principal of the Concord Group. Michael Minlin, who had to step out, but he is the managing principal at Minlin Consulting. And of course, Rocky Shen, who is with DNA, which is a design and architecture firm. The schedule and kind of the mayor alluded to the events in terms of why it is that we're actually here. So in June, there was a retail event on that was presented to public officials. From that, the event generated enough interest in addressing retail corridor issues. With that, we decided that it was necessary, based on a need that we were responding to, that there were other cities that had retail corridor issues. The RFP was solicited out to cities within Orange County, and your city was lucky enough to be selected for this, and we're excited because, again, we love Garden Grove and we're happy to be a part of this solution with you. What's going to happen is we held, of course, the TAP. We've been conducting due diligence for months leading up to yesterday. Yesterday, we were able and fortunate to meet with a lot of community representatives, businesses, and some of the community members, some of you that are here in this room. And then what has happened is over the last day, today, if everybody looks a little tired and haggard, it's because we literally were sequestered in one room all day long, and it was our chance to basically come up with these solutions. Sounds kind of crazy, and you're thinking, it's not because it doesn't deserve more time, it's honestly because the idea is that we've been conducting this due diligence. It gives us a day to really dive deep. We've got all the right people, which rarely ever happens in a development strategy, that you get all the experts all at one time, all in one place, that come in prepared and ready to really not solve a solution, provide a recommendation. What's going to happen on July 25th next week is we're going to present to the ACCOC. So again, other cities in Orange County are going to see this and your model as something that maybe and hopefully is replicable and will help them address some of their downtown retail corridors as well. So the TAP process, and this is, because the TAP process, it's a national program, there is an order of events that happens that leads us to derive a really well-vetted and well-prepared solution. So first we meet with the city and stakeholders. Our goal is to understand the vision and really hear what's the key problem, what are the things that we're going to have to address, what are the key questions that we're going to have to ask. From that, we establish a scope of work. And the scope of work is then what tells us we can identify these specific needs, we're going to need these specific experts. Once you've identified those experts, and again, we have the benefit to being one of the preeminent organizations in real estate, is we have access to some of the key professionals that are leaders in each of their industries. That, again, is the key group that was identified to the left of me. The due diligence piece, again, is us really coming together and digging deep and figuring out every single last piece of information we need to really provide that well-vetted recommendation. The brainstorming includes everything from a SWOT analysis, which again is a strength, weakness, opportunity, and threat analysis of what's going on. And then we'll go through and identify different opportunities that can help move the city's situation forward. The final thing is the presentation. One of the key pieces to keep in mind in this is that by no means at any point during any TAP for any city ever is a solution hardlined or defined. Our job wasn't to come in and to tell you this is exactly what's going to work best for your city. I think the great thing to ULI and the way that we function and even this whole process is that we understand that it's not just one expert that's going to be able to provide a solution for you, but it's going to involve a lot of people being involved. So in your particular case, and most of them, is that our goal is just to provide a recommendation to help you move forward. So again, we're not redesigning anything, we're not telling you what's right or what's wrong, we're literally saying this is the best way for you to proceed forward. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mike, and he's going to kick off the rest of the day.
So before, we felt everyone knew the community we're talking about for the benefit of those in TV. The map you're seeing right now gives you the context of the study area for today and gives you a real good overview of the various constraints and opportunities you're going to hear about later from the panelists. What we did find, this is a very unique place, and some of the people we interviewed felt it was a special community, and it's certainly something that has been tucked away for many of us that are out of the area. on the panel, but how the way our panel organizes and how we assemble and synthesize a lot of information. First thing we did after our research, due diligence, and interviews and tours, we do something that's known as a SWOT analysis. If you have not heard of it, it is a way of triaging a lot of data and putting it into a manageable format. This is actually used by a lot of corporations. It's used for a lot of planning projects. And a lot of organizations use it a way to guide their strategic planning efforts. Basically, you break down that information, the key findings, into strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. The strengths and the weaknesses, those are current conditions as a way to think about this. And then the opportunities and threats are really things you can impact, their future conditions. But it gives you a sense. So as you see, the strengths and the weaknesses, some of the things that jump out and you can see on the board, clearly, even though it wasn't the focus of a retail study, the schools are very important to all the stakeholders. The schools are really an asset and amenity. There is a sense of engagement. People do show up. People are connected. And we found throughout this and the access and availability, which can work both ways in terms of people going through the area as well as getting to the area. You have Bridge Creek we found as an interesting example of a retail village that's thriving. So the weaknesses is we saw and we encountered that the PUD zoning is perhaps going to limit the ability to flexibility and the future opportunities, and you certainly are going to have to look at that tool in the future. And you also have a great difference among landowners about their goals and interests in the properties and the development opportunities. And there is now a sense that things are stable, stagnation can occur, but really where we focused a lot of what you'll hear at the rest of the panels is opportunities and threats. We have some specific recommendations in terms of Business Improvement District, Community Association to help bring the community together. We also have, as you'll see there, creating some type of heart in the community, some meeting space, some common area space, creative office, which we'll talk about later, as well as a diversity of experience beyond retail. The threat you have is that without change and some concentrated effort, you could have further stagnation decline. That is just something that in the retail market in general is happening today. And the high demand on city resources is certainly something that's factoring in the public officials. What we did want to share is this is the panel's observations based on our own experience and our understanding. You have some very strong perspectives among the key stakeholders. For example, the residents desire more local retail opportunities, commercial opportunities in the community, not having to drive out of town to do that. That's a very strong goal. They also have a very strong sense of identity and community and protecting what they value in the community today. The city is balancing, and most cities, this is not unique to Garden Grove, but the city is balancing critical public service needs in a time that's very difficult for any city in California because the changing nature of retail also impacts city finances. And the city is also, I think, interested in seeing progress in this area, but recognizes it does not have the tools, and it's really the property owners and the residents that are going to have to be part of that vision. The landowners have there wasn't one single unified voice for the landowners, but the landowners are generally, voicing interest in a better economic opportunity for their properties as part of any future vision. And tenants are really different. These are people who might occupy commercial spaces. They are people that are there. They might not be the owner, but they're very interested in this community and staying here and would like to see it thrive. So what you'll hear from the rest of the panel is, given that SWOT analysis, what are our recommendations and suggestions to the community to do about it? So next will be Richard Gaulis.
Thank you, Mike. Richard Gallis with the Conch Group, and our focus, along with John, is to look at what's happening in the retail market and to have some assessment about the viability for commercial development opportunities within the Valley View corridor. So as we're looking here, as we think about retail, it's not just about a circle, but it's really about how long it takes you to get somewhere. And what's really important is that our trade area around West Garden Grove actually extends into Seal Beach, extends into Cerritos, to Cypress, extends to Huntington Beach, even for our local serving activity within about a 10 to 12 minute drive. So what does that mean demographically? Mike alluded to it in the strengths. We've got strong incomes and resurging demographics as young families are moving into the area. But at the same time, we have an older profile with a higher percentage of folks over age 65, typically in a more retirement mode, than we have certainly in Garden Grove and the county overall. And the critical issue that we are, from a retailer's perspective, a neighborhood scale opportunity. Okay? Since we're a mature, and by that I mean a built-out neighborhood with no new housing growth within West Garden Grove projected, we're actually stagnant from a retailer's perspective. We're stagnant, and it's incompatible with new retail investment. So keep that in mind. But we still see an opportunity. We see the opportunity in the gap of spending. Part of this is because of the existing format of retail. Part of it's because of some of the older configurations of space, where the residents of West Garden Grove are actually spending, or per household I should say, are actually spending about $500 per month outside of the neighborhood serving retail on things such as groceries, health services, fitness, wellness, those categories, restaurants, those categories that are up on the screen. Our view is that with a reconfiguration, we have the opportunity to recapture that spending. So while we're stagnant in terms of growth, we may have an opportunity to move in the right direction. I'll turn it over to John now because it's important for us to understand the nature of retail opportunity that's coming from outside of our immediate neighborhood.
I'm going to speak to one slide. This is kind of meant to connect the dots relative to retail, and what it does show is the fact that you've got the training base on the west side of the site, which actually cuts off the trade area from a lot of people and being able to get to places. But as Richard pointed out on one of the other slides, within 10 minutes, you can leave your local submarket, the community there, and go out of the trade area and patronize other businesses, restaurants, other type of shopping. And so this slide points in the fact you've got points coming from the north, the south. It's easy to get to, and yet it's easy to leave also. We do call it a submarket because it's part of a larger trade area. But there's a mantra in retail right now, and I think it goes to other industries too, of success breeds success. And here I think where our connect the dots is, live local, shop local. Because if the tenants that are already here are doing well, whether it's the Vons grocery store, and we heard a lot of different inputs on maybe the negatives of some of these businesses, working with those businesses and have them thrive is going to help their sales, is going to induce other people to stay, to expand, and other tenants to come to the trade area. So that's probably one of the biggest things in pointing to sales leakage, the fact that supporting that very local submarket area is probably one of the most critical components that's going to lead to long-term success for the area.
Hi there, my name is Hita Mosesman, I'm from RSG. So you've heard a lot about sort of the retail market and where you stand with regard to the retail perspective. So what are some things that you can do to sort of improve upon the current situation? So one of those things would be to look at your zoning. So similar to the fact that I'll just use this example, your iPhone needs a software update every so often. Zoning also needs these types of updates. Many cities are going through this right now, and what you want is for your zoning to incentivize and to encourage those uses that you would like to see in the community that are also feasible in the community, because land use economics and what retailers are looking for also matters. So you want to find that sweet spot of what's feasible and what you want, and you want to make sure you lay the groundwork to encourage that, and that's where the zoning comes in. So what we're suggesting is that you look at possibly a zoning overlay for the Valley View corridor to incentivize the current landowners to develop those uses again that are feasible and are desired by the community. Also, looking at including community benefits in exchange for development. So those would be things like developer-funded hardscape, landscape, plazas, infrastructure, et cetera. That can actually be built into your zoning overlay or your zoning code. The other aspect that we looked at with regard to opportunities is really encouraging the long-term investment by property owners and community stakeholders. That's really, really important. And there are various ways you can do this. Some of the suggestions that we came up with were sales tax sharing between tenants and the city so that no one party has to take all the responsibility there for encouraging development, encouraging uses. Looking at specific investments for certain time periods, or incentives, for certain time periods. For example, the sales tax sharing over a 3-year period. So you have an end date to that incentive. There are also tools such as community benefit districts and business improvement districts that can be formed on the local level, where you can pool resources and monies to cover maintenance, to cover marketing, to put holiday decorations out during those certain holidays, July 4th, Christmas, et cetera. These entities are nonprofit organizations. They're self-governing, and you really do retain quite a bit of local control this way. We also wanted to suggest forming a community association. That would be more on the residential, for the residents, homeowners. Again, it's self-governing, and it really gives the community a voice and participation in the city. And then, we'll cover this a little bit more later in the presentation, is looking at that community identity and really trying to solidify that. For example, and this is just an example, working with the post office to have West Garden, your zip code be West Garden Grove when you send a letter to someone, or they're sending it to you as opposed to Garden Grove. Now I'm going to turn it over to Mary to talk about marketing and branding and more about the community identity. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mary Borgia from the Borgia Company, and
I'm, Jeff Mayer from Air Creative.
so we're just going to sort of wrap up a little bit of what you've heard with regard to marketing and branding. And so what we're doing is try to help you build your brand as you move forward. So what we would recommend is what you want your brand to do is to really be able to help you tell your story. The things that you've heard individuals say this evening, and when you look at the strengths and the opportunities in the SWAT program, that starts to help you formulate what it should be, couldn't be in your brand, and how to take advantage of all that to build it. So that branding helps you build a platform to tell your story, and it works throughout your communications. It's not just your printed materials or your website. It's how your businesses come together, how you make your streets look, what your events do, the feeling and pride that you have in your neighborhood. All that comes through your brand and how you tell your story. So with that, I want to talk about that we're all kind of connected. There's the city of Garden Grove, there's West Grove, and then there's the Valley View corridor. So one doesn't work without the other. They all kind of work together. To that regard, how to take and maybe just create some strategies that will bring the brand forward. So first, you've heard our team say, live local, shop local. I have to say that's like one of the number one recommendations I would make as you build this, because it's the individuals that are closest that will make the area successful. Second part of it is just creating awareness in the marketplace. Maybe that marketplace actually includes the immediate West Grove area as well as those surrounding areas you saw on the map with the bubbles. I think that, as we said, it's a basis for communication. So what you're communicating out, and then what you're trying to do is attract investment. You're trying to attract commercial businesses and tenants to fill those businesses and monetize. I think one of the things is of the opportunities that lie there. We believe that monetizing that traffic, the 40,000 units of traffic on Valley View, that represents a tremendous opportunity because you've got individuals that are working in these commercial industrial areas around, going for lunch, running their errands at lunch, after work, meeting somebody for dinner, whatever. So there's the immediate, but there's also the bubbles, and then even the bubbles further out as you look in the roads in and out. So
Now,
with that,
Well,
yeah.
I was going to add to that we don't think that creating a brand, be it West Grove or whatever, and using that handle, if you will, or that label, is a magic bullet to answer, to answer the issue with, lack of development and occupancy in the retail area. But you've got the foundation of a great story, really, and the brand is about helping you tell a story. This is a neighborhood that you all enjoy living in. It has a lot of great aspects about it. You all watch one another. You watch when there's a weird car in the street. You look out for one another when you go on vacation, that sort of thing. And there are a lot of good things about your story as West Grove that we think you ought to make use of as part of this. Really, we feel like you're starting on a journey. There's not, we're not going to give you 5 easy ways to fix the problem kind of thing, but this is a journey, and all the pieces of what we're sharing with you tonight are part of that journey.
That's good.
The other big thing we wanted to share in this area of branding and placemaking is we heard that, excuse me, what is really, what you're aspired to have is really a heart of your community. And we look at this Valley View corridor, it's really strategically located right in center of your neighborhoods, your community. And so physically it's already working, it's set up to be a place that could be a heart. Now, we don't expect that all of the gross leasable area in this whole corridor is going to be magically leased in the next year or two, but starting with a seed of something, there's some good things, for instance, at Bridge Creek, and working with some local owners to create specific businesses that that are special, aren't necessarily chain restaurants and things like that, where you can create your own identity around West Grove. We think that a lot of the vehicles that Hita and my colleagues have shared are good ways to kind of spark you along starting on that journey.
So I think one of the things that Jeff just mentioned that we wanted to bring forward is how success is best when it's authentic and grows organically. So just the example of what we were talking about in terms of the city has some tools in the toolkit to support local businesses, to grow small businesses, and I think there's some other food opportunity programs that exist. When you look at something like Bridge Creek, which already exists, and you look at all those little businesses that are incubating within there, that's almost like seeds. And those individuals might be ready to start moving up. So it's looking within the resources of opportunities that already exist in the community as well as attracting new to it. So I think
That's good.
that's it.
All right, so what does all this mean? One of the things that we like to do is, because there's a lot of information, because we're not providing a specific recipe intentionally, because for us to do that would basically be accounting for or discounting the participation of everybody involved, from city, stakeholders, community members, landowners, things of that sort. So, in terms of next steps, one of the first things is scaling the expectations of what's going to happen and how quickly it's going to happen. It's clear that the community that's here is very active, and they have a love for their home. They have a love for their hometown. There's definitely pride that already exists in it. The Valley View corridor clearly has been something that's been a source of frustration, and I think that everybody wants to see it fixed now. And I think that's one of the things we did want to address, is that how do you eat an elephant? This is a very wonderful corridor in the fact that you have some of the key things that are primed for development. A lot of the things that a lot of other retail centers want, from traffic flow to freeway access. There's a lot of good infrastructure that already exists where a lot of businesses go, get established in areas where there's not enough traffic flow. So there's a lot of great things working for it. However, it's a pretty large area. So I think the thing is to understand that it's probably not going to happen overnight, and that's okay. I think that everything from different perspectives of who needs to do what first in the order of operations needs to get established, but then to understand that because there's different landowners, we saw that as being both a positive and a negative. Say that it was one complete landowner, you wouldn't even necessarily be able to fix that overnight because there's saturation points for retail. We can't just say that everything's going to get tenanted all at once. We refer to the Bridge Creek example as something that's almost kind of ideal. It's your locally homegrown, really well engineered success model. As we drove through it, it's kind of like your unsung hero. The scale of it, the fact that there's really great local business owners, that there is a mix of food and beverage. It's kind of a really great model in one place, and it's in this area. But it's happening, the success model is happening on a much smaller scale. So again, it doesn't have to exist all the way through it. Maybe you just need those little nuggets of little wins periodically in the short term. When we say short term for development, that could be, 5 to 10 years. But just to understand that the scaling, the expectations, and the timing is going to be critical for everybody to understand. Enhancing the physical environment. The community pride that we heard and saw from really everybody involved is key. I think that one of the things that people aren't proud of is the way that it looks and it feels. It doesn't reflect the heart of the community and the people involved. There are things that we had talked about in terms of community improvement districts and business improvement districts that maybe could do things just to change the infrastructure and help a little bit along the way, whether it's, again, a celebration during Christmas and things like that. Maybe there's signage, temporary signage that can be put up that really establish it as a place. Everything from street furniture, small things along the public right-of-way that basically make it feel a little bit more tended to, cleaned up, and loved. We think that that's something that could help in the short term to basically reflect the pride that already exists. Another short-term goal is to convene a community educational forum on the realities of retail. This is something that we thought we couldn't leave the room without addressing, is that in listening to all of you, and again, this is an unbiased opinion, everyone has a different perception of who the source of the problem is. And truthfully, I think there's a little bit of onus on everybody from either having the patience or being willing to listen to one another. The perspective of and responsibility of the city to make sure that you as its constituents and property owners feel like you're being heard and that they're taking action. The community feeling like they're being neglected and their needs aren't being met. The landowners feeling like retailers, they can't convince them to come here because there's not enough of an incentive or even just anything that makes it economically viable for them. Everybody really does have a stake, and we didn't get the sense that anybody's just not doing anything, but there's definitely frustration as far as not feeling like you can move in any direction. So one of the things that we got clear on was that there's a lot of misconceptions on how and why retail exists in certain places. Some people are thinking it's just because it's for lack of trying and not wanting to. Retailers have very specific reasons to be in certain areas. A lot of it has to do with current things that need to be addressed locally that each of you can do your part in somehow. But part of it is really making sure that everybody's really versed on that perspective. And we think that that educational workshop of some sort would prime everybody to, one, understand, but then maybe to come together and engage in a conversation that allows everybody to be heard, but then also maybe to have a better vision of what can come sooner. Long term is to develop a community brand and strategy for who you are now and a plan for where you want to be. And we talked about that marketing piece. Again, we don't think that that's a Band-Aid or, as I had mentioned, just because you brand something doesn't necessarily mean that people are going to come. But what it'll do is it'll allow everybody to have one focused perspective on where they're going based on who you already are. We heard lots of great things in terms of what works now. Tonight, we know that there's a concert that's going on, and that's something that's very near and dear to the community's heart. We know that there's some recreational opportunities. We know that there are a lot of family-oriented activities, things of that sort. So to focus on that, harness it, and let that be part of who it is that you're going to be so that it aligns with it. Because the last thing that we would ever recommend is brand it to something that you're not now, without considering everything it is that you have already been involved in building within your own hometown. And the next thing is to encourage uses that are desirable and feasible for West Grove. What we mean is this solution probably isn't going to be 100% pure retail. Given what we heard in terms of the need for amenities and places to gather, a lot of the things that were removed opportunities for a lot of your existing community organizations to have a place to meet. Everything from recreation and things of that sort. It's probably going to be a combination of everything from commercial. That's why anytime we're talking about this, we're not saying retail. We're intentionally saying commercial. Because, for example, the Bridge Creek project, it's got a mix. Again, it's a pretty good model where it's got a mix of commercial offices, it's got food and beverage, it's got a little bit of that. Maybe that sprinkled in with some recreational opportunities or areas for people to gather would really come up with a blend where it didn't have to be retail all at once. But again, it allows something that's scalable over time to really create a downtown heart, as our team had mentioned, that makes a little bit more sense for making progress within your community. So with that being said, it was a great exercise and effort for us. We learned a ton. We appreciated the fact that everybody was candid and honest with us about it. And we hope that the findings that are produced in the report, and again, today this is a presentation, and it will be compiled into a report that is then published on the ULI's website. And it's something that we'll also share back with the city as well. So with that, thank you all very much for your time. And I believe we're going to open it up for questions. Yeah. So it's Winna? Okay.
The question was, when is the report going to be issued?
And it was our timeline. Yeah, go ahead, Yolanda.
Generally, the time frame is around 90 days for us to, again, basically distill or expand the information that you saw condensed and compile it into a report after editing and things like that. So probably about 90 days.
Yeah.
Yeah, come on up.
Thank you.
First of all, thank the panel for this expert opinions. I'm Chris Beard. I'm the council member for that district, and it's a pleasure to have you here tonight, and it's certainly a pleasure to have your unbiased opinion on what you expressed. My just general question would be, you talked about different aspects and different properties. A lot of people in my area concentrate on one particular property, and that is the Cocoa site is commonly referred to. What's your idea, based on what your presentation, what you saw, if there was, you said the benefits and the problems with having one owner, one property, if you were to concentrate on that one particular property and its proximity to the freeway, its volume and everything like that, could that have a turning point in our long-term strategy to really develop our area, have a renaissance, a renewal of commercial in that area?
Yeah, I'll hit it off, and then John probably wants to chime in. I think I'll answer it this way. I think any of the properties that are currently not optimized could be a catalyst for the entire area. So, and I think what Yolanda was trying to share at the end, it's unlikely everything would happen at the same time. There's certainly a lot of interest in that property that was expressed by the residents that, you know, the closure of the Cocos is something where it was a community meeting place, not just a restaurant. I mean, that was clear through some of the feedback. But you know, I think what we were sharing is that it's not simply the reopening of one restaurant or retail, it's whether there's some type of sense of forward progress. So it wouldn't need to be the transformation of either major center, but just something that could be catalytic. It could be one individual, it could be a restaurant. It could be some forward progress on a couple of uses that the community, the city, and the landowners feel have been cultivated because there's a more aggressive marketing and branding effort. So I think that, and then from a retail market analysis, I don't know that we certainly heard a lot, but I think we saw opportunities on both sides of the street. You know, I don't think to us, the retail experts saw that it was exclusively on one side. There was certainly more hope that things would move forward on the Cocos Center.
Just a thought. I agree that it could be any of these properties that could be the catalyst, the starting point. Certainly there's a lot of opportunity with that, I think it's 7-acre site overall. It's not really just one, if you replace Coco's, I don't think that would really solve your problem. In terms of what we mentioned earlier is that we felt you needed a heart to your community, a gathering place, a place to have coffee with neighbors, a place to meet. And it's not just one store, it's a combination of a few smaller places with some outdoor realm, if you will, for people to gather, and it's that community identity that starts, and it could happen on any of the properties.
We have a microphone now, so.
All right, so John, you want to round that
Just
out?
one more thing, just, property rights are wonderful because you as an owner control your property. The flip side of it for the community, when you see a piece of property languishing, and not just vacant, but languishing and maybe bringing things down a little bit, you can't force an owner to do something. They have, thoughts relative to their, taking on debt to finance improvements. They want a certain rental rate. Sometimes they just don't care. So it starts to be compelling when you've got the context for the area. That's that rising tide raises all ships, and that's going to be that evolution just over time, whether in the next 6 months or the next 10 years, something will happen there, but it's frustrating for you as the local residents and consumers to see it languishing.
And I think you have to put yourself in the property owner's shoes as well and think about, okay, what does it mean if you develop that property? How does it change your tax basis? And what does it mean in terms of a business enterprise for them? Maybe there's some ways you can work with those landowners and try to, somehow facilitate change.
And I think this is where the zoning comes in that I talked about. Because and I'm not advocating for one zoning type or another, or one land use or another, but zoning is the city's ability to incentivize development and make a change. So I think it's really worth studying what is feasible in terms of development, what the demand is in terms of development on that corridor, and then use that information to make informed decisions about how you want to, do your zoning overlay, for example, and how flexible you want it to be.
Next question.
That was going to be my question, if you go into more detail about the zoning and how that works.
Well, so basically, when a property owner, when you own a piece of property, there's something called highest and best use, right? And I'm trying to explain this, because I like when people explain things in simple terms, so I try to do that myself. So what you want to do, if you're a property owner, not like a homeowner, but a property owner, it's investment, it's for your business, you want to get the most out of that you can, the most amount of rent or lease or whatever that is. And usually you're looking around at what the market is demanding, right? And so if you're a property owner who wants to maximize the value of your property, you're going to want to build or improve your property in the way that will result in the most amount of revenue to you, right? That's pretty universal with all property owners. So that's where you want to get ahead of the zoning in an area such as this with the characteristics that you're seeing, because you want to have the ability to set and encourage the type of development you want. And again, I can't emphasize enough, looking at the feasibility and the land use economics of when developers go in and look at building something in a community, they do what's called a pro forma analysis, which is basically how much would it cost to build it, how much would I get in revenue either when I sell it or lease it, and if the number is negative, they're not going to do it. It's just that, it's that simple. And that's really what dictates development everywhere. So if your zoning says you can do a one-story building and it can only be this type of retail, that may constrain because that number might be negative. As opposed to if you can do a two-story building and it's pretty flexible, you could have creative office mixed with retail, the pro forma might be positive. So you might decide to do a development that includes retail if it was also mixed with something else, and I'm not saying what that has to be, but it's really, it's a feasibility analysis, and it's revenue driven from, as Jeff pointed out, from the property owner's perspective. You know, it's their business, so they're going to try to maximize their investment.
Thank you. There were two things you talked about a little bit: overlay districts, and then you used the term form-based code in the presentation. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about both of those two a little more.
And I think we have a couple different commenters on there. I think we should do form-based second, and the overlay district is kind of a unifying tool that deals with both a little bit of the marketing and branding, but also a zoning technique. So on the overlay, I think, Jeff, is that kind of more your...
Sure, I'll start. You know, a lot of cities in Orange County have used this really effectively, where you take the existing zoning and you create a special overlay in a certain geographic area that provides flexibility in terms of development options. And it, as Hita was mentioning, provides some flexibility and incentives for property owners to develop according to a pro forma that does make sense. So that's one aspect, and my colleagues can add to that if they like. Quickly on the form-based code, it's another concept for how to define the development code, the building code, if you will, for an area based on the form of the buildings. It has to do with heights and widths and proportions, working within certain envelopes. And for instance, one of the issues we see with this corridor is you've got the retail shop buildings are so far back from Valley View. You've got the sea of parking way out front. The form you have is this flat parking lot that's like 5 times the width of the actual building, right? You ask the question, is that a form that really works? Does that create the kind of village that I want to, you know, go have a coffee with my neighbor in, you know? This is, there's a whole kind of industry that's developed around form-based codes that would be worth exploring, and there are pluses and minuses, but the notion is that it provides flexibility for landowners and developers to work within some sort of a prescribed envelope that would contribute to the kind of scale that you would hope to have in your community.
And John, I think you spoke to how the overlay district might be a signal to investors in retail and commercial opportunities, that it could be a very positive tool, not just the zoning aspects of it, but the marketing. I mean, it would signal. Do you view it that way from a...
Definitely. I mean, I'm working in the city of Norwalk on an overlay right now where it would give greater flexibility, and it's very specific to the area that it enhances. You're not talking about something that is going to affect the city from an overall basis. It's very localized, it's very focused, and takes into account the needs and demands of the community. From a financial perspective, again, it's all at the end of the day about investment. There's the investment of capital relative to the owner of the property. There's the investment by the tenant in the property. There's the investment of the community of being a patron to that property. It all comes back to something like that. But overlays increasingly we see as a very useful tool to go after specific types of uses.
I just want to add one point to that. So, as Jeff was saying, overlay districts can be for certain, variety of commercial uses. So we're recently working on one that happens to be a medical office overlay. So in areas that might typically not be zoned for that, we might be able to put in medical office or rehabilitation uses or other things that serve the changing nature of the community. In another city we were working with recently, was a biomedical manufacturing overlay zone, which was a little more nuanced given the nature of hospitals around that certain community, and typically they weren't allowed in this part of town, but because we put an overlay, it allowed that perhaps to go into underutilized retail. Same thing, there might be a pure office overlay. In other communities, they'll do a housing overlay district, where you might allow, again, within the appropriate densities and sizes and values, you might allow housing in certain zones. So there's lots of ways to think about it, and I think the biggest thing that connects the conversation between overlay zone and the form-based code, the overlay zone is really about the kinds of uses you want to encourage, and the form-based code is not about the uses, but it's literally about the configuration, the way you want it to look, and the way you want it to feel. So both of those need to be put in play. The way you want it to look, irrespective of the uses, and then how you want to meet the community's needs going forward in the overlay.
So the common theme, both from the zoning, the market feasibility design, is right now you have property-specific zoning regulations on. And if you're trying to create a cohesive corridor, for whatever reason, for whatever purpose, everything we've been trying to present are the tools that help create a more common vision and a common platform for that. Whether it's a business association, whether it's an overlay, you're creating a sense and a signal, I think, to the outside community too, that you're encouraging certain types of uses. And right now, I don't think that's there.
One thing. The number one weakness that was on our slide was the comment about outdated PUD zoning, which is an outdated planned unit development zoning, which specifies for specific parcels exactly what can be built there. So in the current configuration and the way property owners need to kind of move forward, they actually have to apply to change specifically their uses to something that maybe they don't even know is coming yet. And hence it increases the risk significantly for new investment.
That's a great point.
That's a real, and that's something that probably with an overlay zone or with other kind of factors you can probably tweak and loosen up a little bit that would reduce the risk of making those changes and facilitate some investment.
And that risk, what it led me to think about is, you think about the pace that our world is changing in right now.
Yeah.
And try to put yourself in the place of a property owner, and how do you anticipate that change? How long a lease do you write? What kind of tenants do you attract? And providing that flexibility, or the other term that's popping in my head is agility. How do you stay agile in this crazy changing world that we're in, with technology just changing the equation so quickly? So this notion of an overlay and the form base provides that flexibility, or it could provide that flexibility that we're talking about, to try to position yourself for ever-changing world, if you will.
And again, the panel was not criticizing the use of the PUD tool because in it, the purpose it was there for, it was an alternative to conventional zoning. It was an alternative at the time. It was actually a very progressive tool at the time to not do everything on a cookie cutter restriction and setbacks. What the panel's observations is today, things are much more integrated in terms of office. You'll see people working, and when we talk about creative office, many of you know that people that work from home, but they actually need a place to work. They like to be in a retail or commercial area. They don't want to be in the middle of industrial parks. There's a lot of these uses that are different today. There's different technology, and they want to co-locate. And sometimes the restrictive zoning, which was really there to protect the integrity of the adjacent neighborhoods and the like, it still had it played a value, but they don't reflect today's realities. So when we're talking about that, it's not just that there would be no zoning. It would be, if you decide what you want to incentivize, that would be a tool to use it. So I think we wanted to be very explicit, but there was one comment that the retail experts, financial experts, marketing experts, they all agreed on, is that you have to send some signal of what you're trying to encourage. And that wouldn't be the current tool.
Okay, we have time for one more question. Is there anybody out there with one last question? Okay, you get to be last, so one more and then Lisa.
I just want to make a comment on the citizen aspect of it. I think a confirmation would be you found a very vibrant community, engaged community, and a community that would support businesses along the Valley View corridor. So if the right combination of everything you've talked about and the steps moving forward, we can have a very successful business corridor along there. So that's the confirmation I wanted to make.
Yeah.
There's no question about it. We talked about branding. We had an effort to rebrand or designate West Garden Grove. That's clear. It wasn't creating a new brand, it was reflecting who we are.
Yeah.
So that's what I want to make clear.
And I think we should share, and it's implied with us both being here and the results. We saw we can go to communities where there's a certain level of apathy and disengagement. where a residential community is actually not concerned at all about what's going on in the retail corridor, and vice versa. So we did not see that. So I think what we were seeing is strengths to build up from, and great potential. So that if that that might confirm it is time well spent to invest the type of time in the resources and what we're laying out.
And just echo on that, it will be a success because the people and the citizenry there is there to support those businesses suitable to that area.
One final thing to that is that the key thing to keep in mind again is that we're intentionally saying commercial corridor because we want you to hear that there is opportunity, but we want you to hear that the perspective needs to be scaled to understand that it's not a pure retail solution. So there's definitely commercial development opportunity, but know that it's probably not going to be 100% retail.
Thank you again to the ULI TAP panel for all your wonderful recommendations and strategies. I do have one that I would like the panel to maybe just shed a little bit of detail about. It's the Business Improvement District that could be dedicated towards some infrastructure improvements and for a small dedicated period of time. But I think it relies on the community, the real estate, the property owners to commit to achieve that. So I think to provide, I understand how the Business Improvement District works, but I think it might be helpful to the residents and to the stakeholders to understand what it really translates to, which is an assessment, and if you can provide a little bit of further detail.
And I think the report can describe those tools more importantly, but basically, in simplest, it's almost like a homeowners association for a business district, and it's a very common tool. And it requires a lot of cooperation and collaboration, but it's used in many communities as a way to, as a platform for revitalizing and enhancing the commercial corridor. It's usually around a street or a community. It's in a lot of downtowns. It's used, and the reason that they're becoming more prevalent is some communities want to have more, or towns or villages within a larger city have a little more control over their own destiny. So they are looking at, some communities like to have, for example, streetscape, artscape. You go to villages where there might be certain types of statues or animals throughout the city, and that's their attraction. It's what they like to do. It's an arts and culture. And it's certainly not something the entire city should be, would be supporting. So where there's needs beyond citywide needs, basic public safety and maintenance, but you want an enhanced level of care, marketing. Some communities do banners and streetscapes that are unique to that village as a way to market. Those are the types of things in a business improvement district can do. We use the term community benefit district because we think it's something broader. It could, and that's a tool that some communities are looking at for broader explanation. So some of you are familiar with Little Italy, which 10, 15 years ago is something you drove through in San Diego on the way to something. They are one of the most prolific and thriving business improvement community benefit districts. They've created a sense of place. Now this is a corridor, it's different, but you can see examples of how they've been used. Again, it's a tool where you have individual land ownerships. Are there things everyone agrees would be important for the vitality of that corridor? It goes hand in hand with an overlay, and again, it'll be fleshed out in the report, but it gives a certain amount of local control and destiny. So, Mary?
I wanted to say, in terms of the marketing of the property and the use of implying the branding, the bid can do that for you, because a component of that budget can be the marketing outreach. It could be published materials, it could be the website, it could be events, it could be gatherings, it could be things that engage the residential community more with the commercial community. So it's a tool to also to tie community together in a stronger manner.
I just wanted to say, too, that Huntington Beach and Long Beach have both implemented business improvement districts in commercial corridors very successfully. Burbank and Pasadena, the same. I also wanted to highlight that you're self-governing. It's a nonprofit, so it's not the city imposing something. There's a vote from all the businesses, and it can't pass unless enough people vote for it. And there's a process, a legal process that you have to follow. So it's very transparent, and there's a board that decides, and it's made up of the businesses in the community. So it's something that if the business community wanted to pool resources to make sure that there's unified marketing, there's unified messaging about West Garden Grove, that is an option, and it's one of probably the most widely used tools now, after some other tools went away a few years ago. And I think there was one other thing I wanted to say, but I can't remember. But I just wanted to give the full picture of what was involved.
And that'll be in the report again.
There's one thing about the business improvement conversation, I think, because you were sort of alluding to it in the question. Really, the main reason why we see landlords and retailers participating in the business improvement district is because it's really part of a marketing budget that facilitates driving retail sales into their center. So the objective of the business improvement district is not just to make something beautiful, but the objective is to have a direct payback in multiples for what you're putting out in the business improvement district, adds to that marketing budget, back to your retail sales. So it's really a self-interested, positive way of having a self-interested group of property owners improve the area and, in fact, enhance the performance of their investment. That's the real reason why it's done. So it's to really hit the rubber where it meets the road, right? Yeah.
So again, thank you. We know giving up your time is precious during these busy times, in summer in particular, so we do appreciate your patience, and look forward to compiling the report, which will incorporate some of the, hopefully the answers to questions tonight. And again, as we shared, we've been locked in a room for the day, and it's a very, very nice room. So this is, we are, the way our protocol works, we do our initial presentation, we get some questions, but then the real work on the report comes out. So I think it's a great process because it gets us thinking right away, but you'll see more in the report on some of the questions you asked.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.